after the female lays the egg, the male will take charge of looking after it. He'll basically get the egg onto his feet and then tuck the egg into a pouch underneath his belly, where it will stay there for months until it hatches. And while the females go off to sea to feed, the males then have to stay and look after their eggs while braving the darkest and coldest nights on Earth. Because around winter time in Antarctica, when the sun sets, it does not rise again for 4 to 6 months. And the male emperor penguins are hit by gale force winds that could freeze human flesh solid. And so what they do is they all huddle together, tuck their beaks in, and they can all keep warm. In fact, they take it in turns to have their backs to the gales, and they can do that for months on end. And then, when spring arrives, when the sun finally rises, the male emperor penguins have not only survived the longest and coldest nights, suffered gale force winds and freezing temperatures, and lost almost half their body weight, but their chicks hatch, and then they wait for the females to return to feed them and take over. And once they do, the males can then head out to sea to feed for themselves. Of course, not all the females return, because a lot of them are either taken by leopard seals or orca. But penguin chicks will also face foes like the skua, or even the giant petrel bird. And of course, it's very rare that skuas will attack fully grown adults, because of course the only natural predators to penguins are leopard seals, killer whales, skuas, and the giant petrel. I mean, they're not endangered as far as I know, but they are still, to me, some of the most amazing birds. Here is their range. But also, one more thing about the emperor penguin. Many people say that fathers in nature are absolutely useless. But take a page out of the emperor penguin's book, ladies, because you try having to sit in the gale force wind in the coldest, darkest months, with an egg under your pouch and having to hold your back to the gales of Antarctic winter and losing half your body weight. Then tell me that emperor penguin fathers are useless. Before I move on to the next ones, I'm going to show you all the different types of penguins around the world. As you can see here, there's the emperor penguin, which is the largest. Then there's the bellow penguin, the chin strap penguin, so called because of the marking underneath the eye and the beak that looks like a chin strap on a helmet. The king penguin, which is a close relative of the emperor penguin, but it is the second largest penguin. The gentoo penguin, which is the fastest penguin in the sea. Then there's the northern rockhopper penguin and the macaroni penguin, which, unlike, well, I thought when I was a kid, it is not named after pasta. The macaroni penguin is actually named after a colourful 18th century hat. But then there's also the royal penguin and the southern rockhopper penguin. Well, those are the penguins in Antarctica and the subarctic Antarctic islands. And South America, they've got the Magellanic penguin, the Humboldt penguin, because you see Humboldt penguins all the time in zoos. Then there's the Galapagos penguin, then the African penguin, which is native to Africa, And then there's then in Australia and New Zealand, they have the little penguin, the yellow-eyed penguin, the Fiordland penguin, the Snares penguin, and the erect-crested penguin. And of course, as you can see, there's not just the one group of penguins. There are penguins found all over the world. Now, for the next one, it is probably the most heavily defended animal in the Arctic Circle. It is the musk oxen. Now, musk oxen, as I mentioned earlier, are with the wolves, because musk oxen are bovids or bovine animals, which means that they're in the cow family. And if your idea of a cow is a slow-moving, dopey, friendly freeloader chewing the cud, you could not be more wrong. Because this group of animals contains the water buffalo, the Cape buffalo, the bison, and of course the musk oxen themselves. And these animals can be very, very grumpy and unpredictable. In fact, musk oxen were around during the Ice Ages, so they evolved around animals that are now long extinct, not just wolves, but also the mammoth, the woolly rhino, and saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave lions. And of course, looking at this, a musk oxen's skull, as you can see, they've got formidable horns. In fact, in a flat-out charge, they could snap a wolf's spine, but at close quarters, they could use those horns to gouge and gore at its attackers. But also, one reason they're so successful in the Arctic is down to their fur, because they have some of the most well-insulated fur of any mammal. Because the outer layer is very long and thick, it's all tightly packed together, but underneath is a soft inner wool that's almost like cotton wool, and that protects them from the forces of the wind and all that. In fact, if I was to put this fur on, I would probably start to overheat in a matter of minutes. Another reason why musk oxen are such deadly defenders is that during the summer months, the bulls will fight each other for breeding rights. So what they do is, like here, they will charge at each other, smash their heads together, and they will inflict deadly wounds. And of course, musk oxen have notoriously bad tempers, and they're built like tanks. And of course, they can go from 0 to 60 in under the 5 seconds. And of course, their enormous skulls are like battering rams, but their spines are built to withstand the jolts. Although in many in many fights, at least one of the combatants will be killed. And of course, the leader of the herd has the most to lose, not only his territory and herd, but possibly his own life. And of course, the winner either gets to keep the herd or win the females, and the loser has to spend another year alone. But of course, musk oxen aren't all just about, well, their defences are not all just about speed, formidable horns, and a bad temper. In fact, when they feel threatened by predators like wolves or bears, what they do is they gather up as a herd with the calves on the inside, presenting a wall of horns to any attackers. I've not seen the musk oxen before, but even so, I would not want to get that close to them because I've seen what they can do, and I would rather not have every rib in my body shattered. And of course, here is much of their range. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of the most beautiful birds and a true icon of the Arctic. It is the snowy owl. Now, snowy owls are the second largest owls, but they're only the second largest because the largest is the eagle owl. Of course, you can tell them apart by looking at the plumage. This one here is a male. You can tell he's a male because it's only the males that are the ones that are pure white. This one here is a female. They're usually black and white. And they're great hunters of the Arctic tundra. And another thing about snowy owl is that they're active in the daytime. And you can tell a lot about owls and what time of day they're active in by looking at their eyes. If their eyes are orange, like an eagle owl, that means they're nocturnal, they're active at night. If their eyes are black, like a barn owl or a tawny owl, they're crepuscular, which means they're active at dusk and dawn. But if they're yellow, like a snowy owl, then they're diurnal, which means they're active during the day. Most of what they feed on are lemmings, which are small rodents, and Arctic hares, small birds, pretty much anything they can catch. And of course, like all owls, they mate for life, and they have fair amounts of chicks called owlets. And it will be the parents' job to provide them with food for about a year until they're ready to fledge, but also to protect them from dangers like wolves and other predators that might want to take their eggs or chicks. And snowy owls have probably become the most famous because they were in Harry Potter. In fact, Hedwig, Harry Potter's owl, was a snowy owl, but J.K. Rowling and the filmmakers got it a little bit wrong. Hedwig was supposed to be female, but she was pure white in the films and that meant she was played by a male, which irks me just a little bit. But of course, they're of no danger to humans at all. But if you were a lemming, these would be your living nightmare. Of course, here is their range. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of the most notorious creatures for its size. It is the Wolverine. Now, Wolverines are in the Weasel family. They're mustelids. They're the largest of the Weasel family, kind of bigger than a badger, but with incredibly powerful jaws and teeth. And of course, since they're in the Weasel family, that is a group of animals well known for punching above their weight and taking on animals many times their own size and having no fear at all. Of course, that made the fact they were so fearless and so ferocious, they inspired the X-Men character Logan or Wolverine. And when I said about the Wolverine having powerful jaws, I mean, a Wolverine can bite with the strength of over a ton per square inch, so they could easily take off my fingers or possibly even my hand. But also, they don't just hunt small mammals, like rabbits and hares and rodents. They will even take on moose, caribou, and they've even been known to fight with bears, which is absolutely phenomenal. And of course, they're not endangered at all. In fact, they're slowly making a return to the northern states of North America, but in Canada, as well as Alaska and Russia, they're found everywhere, but even so, they're very shy and very elusive, and I really would not advise trying to give one a hug because you would probably end up getting torn apart. And here